The dining room of the Ward estate was designed to impress. A mahogany table stretched nearly 20 feet, polished to a mirror-like shine that reflected the golden glow of the chandelier above. Oil paintings of long-dead ancestors, men in tailored suits, women in elegant gowns, lined the walls, staring down at the living as though judging whether they were worthy of the family name. I sat halfway down that enormous table, fork in hand, carefully arranging roasted carrots across my plate. Across from me, my older brother Daniel leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. He had inherited our father's strong jawline and booming voice, and he wielded both like weapons. "You've always been so unambitious," my father, Victor Ward, said suddenly. His deep baritone cut through the lively chatter like a blade. The entire table stilled. I froze, fork hovering midair. He didn't look at me as he spoke. He rarely did. His attention remained fixed on Daniel, whose smug grin widened at my expense. "Not everyone is cut out for the big leagues, Elena," Victor continued, finally letting his piercing blue eyes settle on me. "And that's fine. But leave the real work to people like your brother." The words burned. I placed my fork down carefully, my hands trembling beneath the table where no one could see. For a long moment, I said nothing. I had learned silence was safest. But that night, something in me cracked. "Except for you, Dad," I said evenly. "I'm the only other person at this table with a track record of success." The words slipped out before I could stop them. My voice didn't waver, though my heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. Daniel smirked. It was the same dismissive grin he had perfected since childhood. The grin that said, "You'll never measure up, Elena." "My name is Elena Ward. I'm 32 years old now, but when this story truly began, I was just the overlooked middle child of a family that measured success by flash and status. My father, Victor Ward, had built one of the most successful real estate empires in Chicago, Ward Realty Group. To the outside world, he was a legend. To us, he was a tyrant whose love was conditional on achievement, whose approval was rationed out in brief, transactional moments. Daniel was his golden boy, groomed to take over the company despite his arrogance and carelessness. My younger sister, Lila, was the family darling, more interested in brunches, designer handbags, and Instagram brand deals than anything resembling responsibility. And then there was me. Quiet, dependable, and, according to my family, forgettable. Dinner tension. The rest of that dinner passed in a blur. Daniel launched into a long-winded story about a property deal he'd supposedly closed. I knew better. I had overheard whispers at the last company event that the deal was riddled with legal issues. But Victor listened intently, nodding proudly as if Daniel were reciting gospel. "And the developer practically begged us to take the property off their hands," Daniel boasted, swirling his wine. "I negotiated a steal." "Smart thinking," Victor said, his smile wide, his pride evident. "You've got the instinct, son. That killer edge." Across the table, Lila chimed in with anecdotes about her latest social escapades. She had just been invited to some exclusive brunch club downtown, and she recounted every detail as though it were front-page news. My father humored her, laughing politely at her stories, even though I knew he considered her pursuits frivolous. Meanwhile, I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, wondering why I still subjected myself to these dinners. When I was younger, I had tried. I worked hard in school, graduated near the top of my class, took on every internship I could find. I thought if I worked hard enough, they would finally see me. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. "You're too quiet," my father would say. "You don't have the killer instinct for this business." It didn't matter that I outperformed my peers, that I had ideas to push the company forward. In his eyes, Daniel was brilliance personified, and I was background noise. The breaking point, the tipping point came a few years later, though my family barely noticed. It was during one of Ward Realty Group's weekly strategy meetings. These meetings were supposed to be collaborative, but in reality, my father and Daniel made the decisions while the rest of us watched. That day, I had a proposal, one I believed could change everything. I had spent weeks preparing, analyzing data, running projections, designing a presentation. The plan was to convert a struggling commercial property into a profitable residential complex. I believed in it with every fiber of my being. When the moment came, I stood, notes in hand, and began to speak. "Dad, I've developed a strategy for the Jefferson Street property." "That location's a lost cause," Daniel interrupted, waving his hand as though swatting a fly. "We've already sunk too much into it. Let's move on." I clenched my jaw. I've actually found a way. "If Daniel says it's not worth it," Victor cut me off, not even glancing in my direction, "then it's not worth it. Next item." Just like that, weeks of work evaporated. My face burned with humiliation as the meeting rolled on without me, as though I had never spoken. That night, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I made a decision. If they wouldn't listen to me in their company, I would build my own. The first risk. I didn't quit Ward Realty outright, not yet. That would have drawn too much attention. Instead, I started small. I found a rundown duplex on the outskirts of town. It was all I could afford with the little I had saved, but I saw potential where others saw rot. The paint was peeling, the plumbing a disaster, the roof leaking. Realtors had written it off as a lost cause. To me, it was a chance. Weekends became a blur of paint-stained clothes and aching muscles. I learned how to patch drywall from YouTube tutorials, how to replace fixtures from trial and error. My hands blistered. My back ached. But I kept going. I remember one Saturday night in particular, sitting cross-legged on the floor, paint streaked across my cheek, eating cold takeout straight from the container while staring at the freshly painted walls. For the first time in my life, I felt proud. Not because anyone had told me I was good enough, but because I had built something with my own two hands. When I sold the duplex a year later, the profit wasn't huge. But it was mine. And it was just the beginning. The spark. Over the next few years, I scouted undervalued properties across Chicago. I learned to recognize the quiet signs others ignored. The bones of a building worth saving. The neighborhood about to boom. It was during this time that I met Maya Chen. A mutual friend introduced us at a networking mixer. Maya was sharp, confident, and fearless in a way I envied. She had already made a name for herself as a savvy investor, though she was still underestimated in male-dominated circles. "You're the Ward girl, aren't you?" she asked that night, tilting her head. I bristled at the phrase. The Ward girl. As if my only identity was being a footnote in my father's empire. "Elena," I corrected, extending my hand. "And you're Maya Chen." Her grip was firm. Her smile, knowing. "I've heard you have an eye for properties people overlook." I studied her, sensing she understood something about me others didn't. That night, over cheap cocktails and too loud music, we struck up a conversation that stretched into the early hours. By the time we parted ways, I knew I had found not just an ally, but a potential partner. That was the night Chun and Ward development was born. We started small, renovating modest residential complexes, flipping forgotten storefronts. I handled strategy and analytics. Maya, with her charisma and confidence, became the face of our company. To the outside world, Chun and Ward was hers. That was by design. My anonymity protected me from scrutiny, especially from my family. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the daughter they had dismissed, the sister they had overlooked, was quietly building one of their fiercest competitors. The first months of Chun and Ward development were nothing glamorous. Maya and I worked out of a cramped office above a bakery in Chinatown. The air always smelled faintly of sweetbread and sesame, and our desks were secondhand finds with drawers that stuck if you pulled too hard. We couldn't afford much more, but we didn't need extravagance. We needed focus. Maya was all energy and charisma, always on the phone, always closing deals or persuading skeptical contractors to take a chance on us. I was the quiet one, poring over spreadsheets, analyzing risks, projecting profits, hunting for overlooked gems on the market. Face and brain. Maya liked to joke, tapping her temple. I smile, you strategize. Perfect division of labor. It wasn't just a joke, it was true. She thrived in the spotlight. I preferred the shadows. Early struggles. Not every venture was a win. Our second property, a row of worn-down townhouses, nearly bankrupted us. The contractor we hired cut corners, leaving us with plumbing disasters and a lawsuit waiting to happen. Tenants complained daily. I barely slept, juggling calls with lawyers and city inspectors. One night, I sat in the office long after Maya had gone home. Papers were spread across my desk, numbers swimming before my tired eyes. "This is going to sink us," I whispered to myself, head in my hands. "Not if we fix it." Maya's voice startled me. I hadn't realized she'd come back. She set 2 cups of coffee on the desk, sliding one toward me. "We're learning," she said firmly. "Every mistake is tuition. We'll get smarter, stronger. Trust me, Elena, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." Her convictions steadied me. Together, we renegotiated contracts, repaired damages, and scraped through. We didn't make much profit, but we survived. And survival meant everything. Quiet victories. After that stumble, we grew more cautious, but also more creative. We found a crumbling apartment complex near Logan Square that other developers had dismissed. I spent weeks analyzing demographic shifts, rental demand, and urban development trends. The numbers whispered opportunity. "This is it," I told Maya, sliding the reports across her desk. She skimmed them, her eyes lighting up. "Everyone thinks this place is a dump." "Exactly," I said. "Which is why we'll get it for next to nothing. And when we turn it around, it'll pay off tenfold." She grinned. "God, I love the way your brain works." The project became our first true triumph. We renovated, marketed aggressively, and within months, the complex was fully leased. The profit was modest but steady, and more importantly, investors started to notice. Still, no one knew my name. On paper, I was just a silent partner. To the industry, Chun and Ward was Maya's brainchild. And that was fine by me. The family's mockery. Meanwhile, my family remained oblivious. At Ward Realty's quarterly shareholder meeting, I sat at the long boardroom table, pen poised over an empty notepad. My father, Victor, presided at the head, his voice carrying authority. Daniel sat beside him, all smug confidence, presenting slides about yet another flashy but flawed acquisition. When the meeting adjourned, Victor turned to me with his usual sneer. "Elena," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "when's the last time you actually contributed to the company? Do you even remember where the office is?" Daniel chuckled. "Not that anyone notices when she's gone. It's not like we're missing out on her brilliant insights." The room erupted with polite laughter. I smiled faintly, masking the sting. If only they knew. If only they realized that while they mocked me, I was quietly acquiring properties they'd written off as worthless. Properties I was turning into successes right under their noses. But I said nothing. Silence was my weapon. Why I hid. Maya often asked why I insisted on staying invisible. One evening, we were reviewing contracts at the office when she set down her pen and studied me. "You ever think about stepping out?" she asked. "Letting people know who you really are? Chun and Ward isn't just me, it's us." I shook my head. "You're better in the spotlight. People listen to you." "Me? I've spent my whole life being dismissed. I'd rather not give my family the satisfaction of knowing what I'm building." Her brow furrowed. "Elena, you're not hiding from them. You're protecting yourself. There's a difference." Maybe she was right, but I wasn't ready to test that theory. Not yet. The rise. By the time I turned 30, Chun and Ward had grown into a legitimate competitor. We had a portfolio of residential complexes, boutique office spaces, even a few prime retail locations. Investors trusted us. The press praised Maya as a visionary. And me? I was the phantom strategist, the ghost behind the curtain. Sometimes I wondered what my father would say if he knew. Would he scoff, insisting it was luck? Would Daniel sneer, calling me a fraud? Or, unthinkably, would they finally see me? But those thoughts were fleeting. I didn't need their approval anymore. Not when I could walk through a building I had saved, hear the laughter of families who now called it home, and know I had made that possible. That was validation enough. The warning. But as Chun and Ward grew, so did the attention. At a networking event, I overheard a competitor muttering about us. That Chin woman, she's dangerous. Came out of nowhere, eating up properties left and right. Someone's backing her. No way she's doing this alone. I sipped my drink quietly, a thrill running through me. They had no idea I was standing 10 feet away. Later, Maya caught me smiling. What's so funny? They're starting to wonder who's behind us, I murmured. Her lips curved into a sly grin. Good. Let them wonder. The longer you stay invisible, the stronger the reveal will be. I wasn't sure if I wanted a reveal, but Maya's words lingered. Because deep down, I knew this balance couldn't last forever. The bigger we grew, the harder it would be to stay in the shadows. And eventually, whether I was ready or not, my two worlds, the Ward family and Chun and Ward development, would collide. The invitation arrived on thick cream cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. The Chicago Real Estate Excellence Gala, honoring visionary developers of the year. Maya had tossed it onto my desk with a grin. We've made it, partner. Chun and Ward is officially on the map. I stared at the card, my stomach tightening. Public events made me uneasy, especially ones where I risked running into people who knew my family name. For years, I had operated like a shadow, content to let Maya take center stage. But this time was different. This isn't just another networking mixer, Maya said, reading my hesitation. This is the gala. Everyone will be there, investors, city officials, developers. If we want to scale, we can't hide forever. Her words struck a chord. I had been telling myself for years that I didn't care about recognition. But part of me, the girl who had once begged for her father's approval, longed to be seen, if only once. Fine, I said at last. But if my family's there, Maya cut me off with a sly smile. Then it's about damn time they learned the truth. The arrival. The gala was held at the Grand Millennium Hotel, its ballroom glittering with crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors. Women in sequined gowns floated past men in tuxedos, laughter and champagne flowing in equal measure. Maya dazzled in a midnight blue dress, her presence commanding as always. I chose something simpler. A black silk gown that hugged my frame, but didn't scream for attention. I wasn't here to perform. I was here to witness. Relax, Maya whispered as we stepped into the ballroom. You belong here. The words settled over me like a shield. Whispers in the crowd. Almost immediately, Maya was swept into conversation with investors eager to curry favor. I drifted along the edges, champagne glass in hand, listening. Chun and Ward, brilliant work on the Logan Square project. Rumor is she's backed by some mystery partner. Whoever it is, they've got a sharp eye for deals. I sipped quietly, suppressing a smile. The anonymity was intoxicating. They speculated endlessly about me, yet none of them recognized the quiet woman standing a few feet away. But then, across the room, I froze. My father, Victor Ward, stood near the stage, a towering figure in a tailored tuxedo. Daniel was beside him, smirking as he held court with a cluster of young developers. And Lila floated nearby in a glittering dress, phone in hand, snapping selfies as if the gala were her personal runway. My chest tightened. Of course the Wards would be here. This was their domain. Elena? Maya's voice was low, urgent. You okay? I forced a nod, but my mind was racing. If they saw me with Maya, if they connected the dots? But before I could retreat, the host's voice boomed through the speakers. The award. Tonight, we honor rising stars who have transformed Chicago's landscape, the announcer declared. Developers whose vision and innovation are reshaping communities. Please welcome to the stage, Chun and Ward Development. Applause thundered through the ballroom. Maya grabbed my hand. Come on. My heart stopped. No, I can't. Yes, you can, she said firmly, tugging me forward. This is our moment. The crowd parted as we walked toward the stage. Camera flashes blinded me. My pulse hammered in my ears. I heard murmurs ripple through the audience. That's Maya Chen. Who's the woman with her? Ward? Did he say Ward? Wait. Ward as in Victor Ward's daughter? My father's eyes locked on me from across the room, his expression unreadable. Daniel's smirk faltered. Lila's phone wavered mid-selfie. And just like that, the truth was out. On stage. Maya accepted the plaque with her usual charisma, thanking investors, contractors, and the city for supporting our projects. Then, to my horror, she handed me the microphone. Elena Ward, she said proudly, my partner, the strategist, the reason Chun and Ward exists. The room hushed. Every eye turned to me. For years, I had been invisible. Now, there was nowhere to hide. I swallowed hard, fingers trembling against the microphone. I grew up in this industry. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. But for a long time, I was told I didn't belong, that I wasn't cut out for leadership, that I didn't have the instinct. Tonight, I stand here not for recognition, but as proof that you don't need permission to build something of value. You just need vision and the courage to act on it. The words flowed easier than I expected. I wasn't speaking for my father, or Daniel, or even the crowd. I was speaking for myself, for the girl who had once believed she was invisible. When I finished, applause erupted. Maya squeezed my hand, but in the corner of the room, I saw my father's clenched jaw, Daniel's narrowed eyes. Their silence cut deeper than any cheer. The aftermath. As soon as we stepped off stage, people swarmed us. Investors, journalists, developers eager to align themselves with the newest rising stars. I smiled politely, but my attention kept flicking toward the wards. Finally, Victor approached. Elena, he said, his voice low, tight. A word. Maya tensed beside me. I squeezed her hand gently. I'll be fine. He led me toward a quieter hallway, away from prying eyes. For a long moment, he just stared at me, his face unreadable. So, he said at last, this is what you've been doing. I held his gaze. Yes. His jaw flexed. Competing with your own family. Hiding in the shadows. Do you realize what this looks like? I lifted my chin. It looks like success. For the first time in my life, my father had no immediate comeback. He stared at me, as though seeing me not as the forgettable middle child, but as something else entirely. Danger. The collision. That night changed everything. The press coverage was explosive. Mystery partner of Chun and Ward revealed as Victor Ward's daughter. Headlines dissected the family drama, speculating about rivalries and betrayals. Investors began whispering about whether Ward Realty was losing its edge. At family dinners, silence thickened like fog. Daniel's smirks were sharper, his words laced with venom. Lila avoided eye contact, preferring to document her curated life on social media. And Victor watched me with cold calculation, as though deciding whether I was a threat to eliminate or an ally to exploit. But I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't the overlooked Ward. I was Elena Ward, strategist, builder, competitor. And whether my family liked it or not, I wasn't disappearing again. The weeks after the gala were chaos. Newspapers splashed my name across headlines. The overlooked Ward emerges as competitor. Family feud brewing in Chicago's real estate elite. Investors began comparing Ward Realty Group and Chun and Ward side by side. For the first time in decades, Victor Ward's empire looked vulnerable. At first, my father dismissed the press as gossip. But when two of his long-standing investors pulled out to back us instead, his composure cracked. That's when the real war began. The sabotage. It started with whispers. Permits that had been moving smoothly for months suddenly stalled. Contractors who had been reliable backed out last minute. Inspections were mysteriously delayed. Maya and I weren't naive. We knew exactly who was pulling strings behind the scenes. Your father's desperate, Maya said one night, tossing a rejection letter onto my desk. He's trying to choke us out before we get too big. I exhaled slowly, staring at the letter. Then we get bigger, faster. It wasn't just defiance, it was survival. If Victor wanted to crush me, I'd make it impossible. Daniel's betrayal. One evening, Daniel requested a private meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met in a downtown cafe, tucked into a quiet booth. He looked sharper than usual, his arrogance tempered with something else. Nervousness. "You think you're clever," he said, leaning forward. "Building in secret. Making Dad look like a fool." I raised an eyebrow. I didn't make him look like anything. He did that himself. His smirk faltered. "You've always thought you were better than me." "No," I said evenly. "I just stopped needing his approval." "You still do." For a moment, his mask cracked, bitterness flashing in his eyes. Then he leaned back, smiling coldly. "Careful, Elena. You're not as untouchable as you think." I left the cafe knowing Daniel wasn't just jealous. He was dangerous. The lawsuit. A month later, Ward Realty filed a lawsuit against Chun and Ward, accusing us of unethical business practices and poaching investors. It was a blatant attempt to smear us, to drag us through costly legal battles. Maya was furious. "This is insane. They don't have evidence." "They don't need evidence," I said grimly. "They just need to slow us down." For weeks, I barely slept, buried in depositions, hearings, endless legal paperwork. The stress was crushing, but I refused to break. I wasn't fighting just for Chun and Ward anymore. I was fighting for every time my family had dismissed me, every time I'd been told I wasn't enough. The turning point, the breakthrough, came unexpectedly. Our lawyers uncovered financial discrepancies in Ward Realty's filings, massive ones. Properties inflated in value, hidden debts, even bribes to city officials. It wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. When the documents landed on my desk, my hands shook. Years of being overshadowed, mocked, dismissed, and now I held the power to bring the empire down. Maya's eyes gleamed as she skimmed the papers. "Elena, this is it. This is how we end them." But ending them meant destroying my father, my brother, my family's name. I stared at the evidence, torn. The confrontation. I requested a meeting with Victor. We met in his office, the same boardroom where he had once silenced me, dismissed my ideas without a glance. He looked older than I remembered. The weight of his crumbling empire showed in the lines of his face. "You wanted to see me," he said flatly. I placed the file on the table between us. "I know what you've been hiding." His eyes flicked to the folder, then back to me. "You think you can blackmail me?" "No," I said softly. "I think I can end you." For the first time in my life, Victor Ward looked rattled. I leaned forward. "You always said I wasn't cut out for this business, that I didn't have the instinct. But you were wrong. I have more than instinct. I have integrity. Something you lost a long time ago." His jaw clenched. Silence stretched. "You're my daughter," he said finally, almost pleading. "Why would you do this?" "Because," I whispered, "you never treated me like one." I stood, leaving the file behind. The fall. Within weeks, Ward Realty's corruption was exposed. Headlines exploded with scandal. Investors fled. The lawsuit against us collapsed. Victor's reputation crumbled. Daniel's bravado vanished as regulators swarmed the company. Lila retreated into silence, her social media filled with vague quotes about betrayal and starting over. The Ward empire, once untouchable, felt like a house of cards. And Chun and Ward? We soared. Investors flocked to us, drawn not just by profit, but by the integrity that Ward Realty had lost. Our portfolio tripled. We weren't just competitors anymore, we were leaders. The victory. Months later, Maya and I stood on the balcony of our new headquarters, overlooking the Chicago skyline. "You did it," she said softly. "You." But it wasn't just me. It was every sleepless night, every failure turned lesson, every moment I refused to give up. For the first time in my life, I didn't need my father's approval. I didn't need anyone's. I was Elena Ward, and I had built something no one could take away. Epilogue. I sometimes think back to that little duplex, the peeling paint, the leaking roof, the cold takeout eaten on the floor. That was where it began, where I stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself instead. My family tried to erase me, to silence me, to pretend I was invisible. But I became the storm they never saw coming. And in the end, It wasn't their name that endured. It was mine.